Hey traders, this is my recap for last week ending November the 13th. I had a lot of trades last week, so let's go ahead and jump in. So the first one was a trade in BA. I put it on the week before that Friday, and I was able to close it out the Monday for just a one-day hold. That's one-day trading days. I sold the 146 strike expiring on the 13th. I got a 1.2 credit. I closed it for 18 cents. And that gave me an overall profit of $510 on 5 contracts. I'd also put on a BABA trade on that Friday. I ended up having to roll that trade on November the 10th. So initially I sold the 287.5 strike and I rolled it down to the 282.50 strike. My initial credit was 2.48, but I had to pay a debit of 1.09 to roll it down 2 strike prices. I was willing to go ahead and pay that debit, realizing that I did receive that credit of 2.48. So that would still give me an overall profit, assuming it gets back above 282.5. As you can see right now, I'm down about $4,000 on this trade. So BABA did take a pretty big hit. It's trading around 260 right now. I'm going to stick with this trade for a few more weeks and keep rolling down my strike price and give it a chance to recover. I may go ahead and bite the bullet and close it out and just take the loss. We'll just see how things go over the next few weeks. But as of right now, I plan to stay with this trade and keep rolling it. Chewy, this is a trade I entered on that Monday. I have it listed here twice. Initially, I had put on 10 contracts, but when the market dropped on Tuesday, I decided to close out 2 of the contracts just to release some of my margin. So that's what this first entry is. You can see I closed it down. I initially sold the 59 strike. I got a credit of 64 cents, but I closed those 2 contracts for 3.45, which gave me an overall loss of $562 on this trade. I left the other 8 contracts open, and I was able to close them out the next day for 14 cents, which gave me a profit of $400 for the remaining 8 contracts. So if you take the 2 together, I lost $162 on this one trade. Pins, I also opened on that Monday. I was able to close it out 3 days later. I sold the 56 strike for the 13th expiration. I initially got a 48-cent credit, closed it for 9 cents, and that gave me an overall profit of $390 on 10 contracts. Etsy was another trade I got into on Monday. I'd sold the 117 strike. I got a credit of 1.01. Closed it for 20 cents and got an overall profit of $405 on 5 contracts. And then also on that Monday, I did a 0 DTE trade on SPX. I'd sold the 3640, 3650 call credit spread. My initial credit was 2.25 and I closed it for 20 cents. That gave me an overall profit of $615 on 3 contracts. And then the last trade I put on for that Monday, I did an Amazon put credit spread. I sold the 3115, 3110 put credit spread for 1.05. I ended up rolling it the next day when the market dropped. I rolled it down to the 3,029.90 put credit spread and got a credit of 32 cents. I had to widen the spread to be able to roll it down that far and still get a credit. So initially I had a 5-point wide spread and now I have a 10-point wide spread. And you can see that as of Friday of last week, I would have lost $115 if I closed it out. Initially, I would have lost $1,000 if I closed it out instead of rolling. RKT, this was an earnings play, so I got in on Tuesday the 10th, closed it out the next day. I sold the 21.5 strike. I got a credit of 1.52, closed it for 75 cents, and that gave me an overall profit of $770 because I had 10 contracts. Yeti, I opened on 11.11, closed it the next day. I had sold the 53.5 strike. I got a 65-cent credit, closed it for 10 cents, and that gave me an overall profit of $495 on 9 contracts. Lyft, I also got into it on the 11th. That was a 2-day hold. I sold the 37 strike put. I got an 87-cent credit. I closed it for 24 cents, and that gave me an overall profit of $630 on 10 contracts. SPX, on that Wednesday, I did another 0 DTE trade. This time I did an iron condor. I did the 3560, 3550, 3585, 3595 iron condor. I got an initial credit of 2.25. I let this expire worthless, so I got to keep all of the credit, and that was $675. On the 12th, I opened a trade in Chewy. I was able to close it out the next day. I sold the 62 strike. I got a 60-cent credit. I initially had my order in to close it for 1 cent, but the order never filled, so I got to keep the full credit on this one, which was $480 on 8 contracts. Disney, this was an earnings play. So on the 12th, I sold the 128, 147 strangle. So basically I'm selling the 128 put and also selling the 147 call. I got a credit of 1.02 and was able to close it out for 2 cents the next day. Gave me an overall profit of $500. Then on Friday, I did another 0 DTE trade in SPX, another iron condor. The 3540, 3530, 3580, 3590. I got a 2.05 credit. Late in the day on Friday, the call side started getting tested, so I decided to roll the call call side. I kept the same strike prices, the 35.80, 35.90. Got a 5-cent credit for that roll. And you can see as of Friday, I would have lost about $1,000 if I'd have closed it out. Peloton, this was a trade I did on Friday as well. Another 0 DTE trade. I was selling the 104 strike, thinking that it would stay above 104, but unfortunately it dropped below my strike, so I had to go ahead and roll it. I initially got a 93-cent credit. When I rolled it down to the 99 strike, I was able to get a 15-cent credit for this week. And you can see as of Friday, if I would have closed it out, I would have lost $1,400. EA is a trade that I've been rolling for a few weeks. I had already rolled it out to the 20th, but I decided to close out a couple contracts to free up margin on that Tuesday when the market dropped. Similar to the Chewy trade we talked about earlier, I initially had 5 contracts for this trade. I broke it up into 3 and 2 because I closed out 2 of the contracts. So this first entry here is my remaining 3 contracts. So when I rolled it down to the 120 strike and I got 1 cent for that roll. I still have those 3 contracts open, but then for the 2 contracts, I closed them out for 4.35. That was a loss of $650 for those 2 contracts. That's considering my initial credit plus the rolls. PayPal is another one that I had to roll. You can see I rolled it on 11.9. I was able to roll it down from the 197.5 strike down to the 195 strike. I got a 5-cent credit for that roll. And you can see as of Friday, I would have lost $1,800 if I would have closed that trade out. Lastly, RKT. This is one that I've been in for a while and decided to go ahead and close it out and take my loss. So you can see I sold my shares for $21.12. That gave me a loss on the shares of $2,230, and that's factoring in the credits I received as well on the put side. But then I also had this $890 profit for the call credits that I was receiving, where I was doing cover calls, and then I had that ratio spread as well. So when you combine all that together, I lost about $1,300 on this RKT trade. But even with the losses I took in RKT and also the loss I took in EA and Chewy when I closed out a few contracts, I still had a total profit for the week of $3,318. You can see that I do have an unrealized loss right now of $8,886. The bulk of that being the BABA trade and then the SPX trade that I had to roll. And then I have my PayPal as well. That's a good portion of that. So right now the BABA trade is the only one I'm concerned with. I'm okay sticking with PayPal, Peloton. Hopefully BABA will recover some where I can continue rolling it down and get back out of the money. The SPX trade I rolled, I actually had to close it out today for a loss, but I'll talk about that in my trade recap for this week. So that's all I have for this recap. Thanks.